Is this recording? Oh my god, I'm sick. Hi, my name is Gabby, and in 2025, I want to read 100 books. That's right, I said it, 100 books. So you're probably wondering why set this ambitious goal, especially when in 2024, I only read one book. One book. I read one, and it was Song of Snakes and Songbirds, I think. Is that what it's called? Hang on. I only read The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. So I was really interested in reading that book because I wanted to watch the movie. Lo and behold, I finished the book, but I never watched the movie. And now that she's coming out with another prequel, I am super excited to continue that series. But moving on to my 2025 goal. I really want to try and get to 100 books. I don't think I actually will get to 100 books. I set a pretty lofty goal of trying to read 100 books because I felt that if I set a really crazy goal, I would fall short. So why not set a crazy goal so that what I actually read is a good, significant number? Recently, I've been very much in book talk on YouTube. I've also seen other content creators create just videos about the importance of reading and how easy it can be to read more books in your life if you just make it more of a habit and you incorporate reading in your day-to-day. So I'm setting the intention of being a better reader in 2025 and doing more things that readers do, which includes creating videos about the books that I read because it's interesting and because I see a lot of content creators that are reading contemporary fiction. I do want to push myself to read more contemporary fiction. Actually have set a goal to read more books published in 2025, but I also have a bad habit of reading just very old, even I would say rereading classic literature, which I know is important for people to read. Not very many people read it, but I still think I just read probably way too much of it, and I read the same books over and over again, which is not good. Or I guess I wouldn't say it's bad, but I could broaden my reading horizons. So let's go over some of the books that I'm going to read this year. I am trying to read as many books that I currently own because I do own a lot. I have a terrible habit of starting a book, getting a third or a fourth of a way through, sometimes even half of the book, and then just stopping for absolutely no reason other than I forgot, I got too busy, and I just never went back and picked it up. So I have many books that I'm going to try and read this year that I've actually started before. I've gotten very far in a lot of them, and I just never finished reading the book. I'm hoping that this year is the year that I finish reading all of them so I can finally say I have completely finished reading this book. So I'm going to show you just some of the few that will hopefully get me to 100. Alright, the first book in my list is by one of my favorite authors, Sandra Cisneros. She published a memoir of sorts called A House of My Own. This came out in 2015. It's an older book, now a decade old, but I just love her writing. It is so, great. Her words and her writing is just so beautiful. I love everything she writes. And A House of My Own is somewhat of a memoir, some of a book on writing, which I really appreciate, things that meld the two together. So this is one of the books that I'm really hoping to finish reading. I've gotten about a fourth of the way through, so I'm just going to start it over yet again and try and finish it this year. But I'm very excited for it. Another book that I am super excited to read, I bought a long time ago. I actually saw the author in person. It was when I was still in college. She visited the Hammer Museum, which anybody that is familiar with UCLA, there is a very popular contemporary museum not too far from the university. Her name is Mary Norris. She published Between You and Me. She calls herself the Comic Queen. She was just really great in person, and the talk, which was a book talk that I went to, was her talking about when she worked for the New Yorker's copy department. So she talks about editing, and just I'm really into writing and books about writing, which is very self-serving, but I'm very excited to read this because I've had it for forever and I just never finished it. Another book, and a book that I have been putting off because honestly, when it came out, it was just a very tough topic. So this book does come with lots of trigger warnings. It is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. So anybody that is familiar with the story of, I won't even repeat his name, but essentially this woman, she was assaulted and her case became very, very public because of the person that committed the assault. She decided to go for a very long time as an anonymous person because she felt that the story that she was coming to light with was a story that many women could relate to. So she felt that it was important for her to be anonymous, just to say that, to kind of represent all women that had gone through a similar situation. And then eventually, once the case was closed, she did come forward and she published a memoir. So I've been putting this off for a long time. It's just a topic that I am really sensitive to and it can get me very upset. So I bought it because I wanted to support her, but I never read it. And now about 5 or 6 years later, I feel ready enough to dive in. So that's one that I'm excited for, and hopefully I don't cry too much. So now moving on to some of the books that these are my classic literature books that I have started before but did not finish, is Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. It's a very interesting read. I would say it's more speculative fiction. I call it a classic because it was written in the 1940s, but really it is very contemporary because of the way he writes. Some people have said that this is the most difficult book they've ever read before. I don't think that is going to be the case for me. I've read some pretty challenging novels, but I don't disagree that this will be a fun and challenging read for me. So we'll see how that goes. Another book that I always go to and I have multiple copies of is Moby Dick by Herman Melville. I don't know why, I just love this book. It's very, to me, LGBTQ friendly. Weirdly, I've never really finished it, so we'll see how I feel about that by the end of the book. It's just, when I read it in a gay lens, so I don't know if that's good or bad, but there's lots of relationships between men in here that are really interesting, and also just, it's funny to me. So there's a lot of scenes that are, if you read them a little bit closely, can be pretty interesting. So I'm excited to read this yet again. I have read most of it. I've skipped a lot of it just because it gets very boring in some parts. Melville goes into a lot of etymology and just like defining things, which can be kind of dry, but other parts of the book are really interesting. There are a lot of references. I would say that this book is not for the faint of heart, but there are chapters that are pretty short if you're into that and if you like that. I think overall, if you read a chapter a day, you can finish this in 1 year, which is pretty significant considering the book itself is like over 600 pages. But yeah, exciting read. Can't wait to get through that. Another book that I've definitely read before and is going to be, I don't know, my like 10th time reading through, but I just love it so much. And every time I read it, I find something new and interesting, is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. Anybody into Gothic literature might enjoy this. I love this book. I read it as a comedy, which is probably not the right way to read it, but it is hilarious to me. I think Bronte does really amazing things, and she has wonderful critiques on upper class and this dandyism, so I think it's really funny. We'll probably do a whole series on this book because of how great of a critique she has on just like higher class and how they view the lower class, and just really awesome things from this book. So I'm gonna reread it. Now moving on to some other things. Some of my nonfiction that I'm really excited to read is Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. I just love Malcolm Gladwell. He writes lots of great things. There's another book that I was reading of his that I can't remember the title, but Outliers is one book that I got almost halfway through and then just stopped. I think I forgot about it. Also because I have physical books, but then I also like to read on my e-reader. Sometimes I just forget what books I have that are not on my e-reader. But it's a really awesome book about success, and it makes you rethink what makes people successful, and it presents a really compelling argument about how we should think about success and how we should think about people that are in the top of their fields. So really interested to finish reading it. I got halfway through and then I just forgot about it. So hopefully I can finish this year. Another book that I got about a fourth of the way through and then just stopped reading, but it's really great, is The Color of Law by Richard Rothstein. This is a really interesting book about how cities are built and why they're built this way and why communities can be segregated. It made me really think about my own community and just where I was living in general. When I started reading this book, I lived in Los Angeles, which is a very segregated city, and it made me rethink how highways and how roads and how major kind of structures can really influence people and their lives. So really good book. Highly recommend for anybody interested in just how cities are built and sociology. Some other books that I'm reading that are, I would say, not in the fiction world include How Children Succeed. I'm reading this on my e-reader, so I don't have a physical copy. But this is a great book. I got pretty far in it and then I stopped reading it, which is a theme with me and reading, but it's by Paul Tough. And the book delves into this topic. It's very similar to Outliers in the sense that it tries to identify what makes someone successful in the long run. And the arguments he paints and the information he brings kind of try and reassess or restructure your brain when it comes to what you think success is and what it means to be successful. So it's a really interesting book. It's focused on really children's psychology and how children growing up are, I wouldn't say evaluated, but somewhat evaluated, and how years later, like what that means in terms of their success. A new book that I've picked up this year and then I actually have a very short time to read because I checked it out from the library is 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals. This is just a book that I was scrolling on Libby and saw that it was available now, and I have a week to read it, but it is a self-help book on time management. I don't know very much about it, so we'll see how that one goes. Another book that I'm hoping to read this year is The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson. So it's just about rethinking or restructuring how you think of the world, I guess. Yeah, I'm not super sure what the book is going to be about, but it is a self-help book, and I just wanted to throw some self-help books in my 2025 reading list. Some fiction that I'm reading this year include an oldie but a goodie is All the Light We Cannot See. I am super ashamed that I never finished this book. I've started to read it probably 5 different times, and it's not that it's not a good book. It's me. I'm the problem. I start reading really great books, get super invested, and then I just put it down and I forget completely all about it, and then I just can't do it. So I've restarted this multiple times. His writing is beautiful and fantastic, and all of the chapters are really short reads. So I can't wait to finish this. For anyone that has not read this, it's I would say, historical fiction. Very much leans on magical realism for anybody familiar with that. It takes place in kind of like World War II, and it follows 2 characters and it walks you through their different lives. One from the Nazi, German side, and one from a person whose community and world is being occupied by the war. And you just watch these 2 characters, see their lives and how war affects them, and inevitably how they both end up being connected to each other. So really wonderful book. It deserves all of the awards that it got, but I just never finished it, so I really want to read it. Another book that's a little bit of oldie, but I really want to read it is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I've heard mixed reviews on this book, but essentially it's about rich kids doing bad things, and I'm kind of into that, so we'll see how that goes when I read it. But it's been on my shelf for forever, and I really want to read it because it seems my style. Another book that has been on my shelf for a while is The Wild Things by Dave Eggers. I'm kind of a Dave Eggers fan. I've read some of his other stuff, and it's really interesting. Some of it is speculative, which is really cool to me. So this is based off of a picture book where the wild things are. He took it and kind of changed it up and made it into a full-length novel. So I'm gonna try and read it. We'll see how it goes. I'm not super into YA fiction. I wouldn't call this YA, but we'll see if it is YA. by the time I'm done. That I want to read is Sad Girl, Strong Woman by Alyssa and Griego. This is an indie book. She is an artist that I actually knew back when I was in college. I don't know how many of these she published, but I thought she was just like really cool in person, so I really wanted to read her poetry. It is a poetry book, so I'm sure that this will be one of my easier reads. However, I do like to take my time with poetry because even though it's less writing, I tend to want to interpret it as much as I can. So this is one poetry book that I have on my list. Besides that, I have 2 books that were published or going to be published in 2025 that I would like to read, just because I feel like a lot of the writing and reading that I do is not current. So I'm pushing myself to be a little bit more contemporary. One of the books is called The Rules of Fortune. It is a Kindle first reads book, so it comes out in February, but I'm hoping to read it in January so that I can give an update on that. It is by Danielle Prescod. Sorry, Danielle, if I'm mispronouncing your name. The other book that was my first Kindle Reads book pick was Voiced Like a Hyacinth. I think it's a flower. I don't know how to pronounce it. It is by Mallory Pearson. It is a fantasy book. The premise is like gothic fantasy, so I decided to read it. All in all, those are the 17 books that I have identified so far that I would like to read this year. I don't know, again, how close I'm going to get to 100, but I set that goal because I just wanted a crazy lofty goal to see whether or not I'd be able to reach it. I'll be doing periodic updates on my reading journey and be giving notes and updating you all on how it's going. So if you are interested in learning about some of the books that I mentioned or pointed out, or if you just want to follow me in this journey to 100, go ahead and subscribe. Thanks. I'm the problem. I